Hi, everybody. Good morning on this side of the pond, and I guess good evening or even middle of the night for those who would be joining us live in the US or Australia. I guess it's a different day though. My name's Ferocious, and I will be teaching this class today about this seminar about strategy training for beginner and intermediate teams and how to do that. It's going to be a fun-filled session, and it's our last day of roller derby stands. So I hope you're all excited, and I hope you've already learned a lot. Yeah, so let's get this started. So what we're going to be talking about today is first, obviously, we're going to do some introductions, and we're going to talk about why we're doing this session. And then we're going to talk about how to train different strategies. If anybody needs the Microsoft Translate, we will put up the code in the chat. So I'm gonna have, oh, it's up there actually. It's up on the top of your screen. So please do type that in if you need it. Cool. Let's go to the introductions. So my name's Ferocious. I have been skating with Amsterdam Roller Derby since January 2010, and have lately been skating with Bear City Roller Derby. And I've been coaching kind of since early on because we all didn't know what we were doing, and it's kind of how a lot of us start, right? Where there's just people need to stand up and coach. I've been coaching a lot since then, though. I've been doing a lot of different trainings and boot camps and stuff all around, mostly Europe. And yeah, I've learned a lot, and so I'd like to share my knowledge. Um, so I would love to know who is out there, even though I know it's probably only a few of us because it's really early, and all the rest will probably be checking in online later. I have a little poll because I'd like to know where you all are from. So if you could fill that in, that would be great. If you're on a mobile device, you would have to switch screens, I think. So please be sure to check that out and take a second to fill it in. I do think we need like a waiting music for when there's a poll going on. Something we'll have to work on for next time. All right, thank you all. Oh, it's a European session right now, which makes sense because it's, early here and stuff and not in the middle of the night. Okay, so we have a lot of more experienced people here. One of my questions was, does the team you coach have a lot of mixed levels within the team? So some say yes, others don't know. So I'll make sure to incorporate that as it was also in my class description. Alrighty, so let's move on to our presentation. Thank you for participating. I really enjoy the fact that this is an actual online seminar where we can talk. So if you have any questions, please use the chat that is like below here for me. It might be on the side for you guys. I don't know. But please use the chat and ask any questions if you have any. All right. So why do we need this session? I think this is a really important session because sometimes in roller derby, I feel like we kind of don't always know how we should train certain things. So on Thursday, I had a class that was talking about the importance of the basic skills and how to incorporate those in your training plan, even if you're working with more advanced skaters, and how to work with that and all kinds of interesting stuff. Um, this session kind of links into that one in a way that I think a lot of times we're trying to do strategies, or we're trying to have our skaters do strategies that they might not actually be able to do. So what I want to do is run through this with you all on like how do we actually how do we actually train strategies, just being like, oh, I think they can do it, let's just try it. Like there's definitely there's definitely something to say about that, but I just really want to make sure that we kind of talk through like how do you actually train them and how do you analyze what you need and etc. So we're gonna run through this, and yeah, I hope you find it useful. So I found this quote online that I really liked, and it's what is tactically desirable must be technically possible. And I feel that really hits it right in the right spot. Um, like I see, like sometimes there's like beginner or intermediate teams that will look at like champs and stuff, and they'll see all these awesome tactics or strategies, and they're like, I want to do that. Um, but you don't actually maybe can technically do those things. So that's kind of why I thought that was a really good quote, and I wanted to share it with you all. So, um, the next 50 minutes, we're going to go through all these different stages. So, how to train strategies. I basically made it a 7-step program, which obviously is a cycle because I think everything goes in cycles. So, the first step is to analyze the strategy you want to teach or train, and then train the needed skills. It says need skills because apparently I was not awake when I made this. I was because it was during the day, but it means it should say train needed skills. And then step 3 is the breakdown of the strategy. Step 4, drills and scrimmage. Step 5, play in a game. Step 6 is analyze and assess. And step 7 is adjust and continue. So let's start with step 1. So analyzing the strategy. Um, I think that a lot of times when we see a certain strategy that we want to adapt to our own gameplay or to our team's gameplay, we don't always, we don't always have a good sense of like why we're actually doing this. Sometimes it's also just like, oh, that looks really cool. Let's try it out. And I'm not saying that that's not good because obviously, sometimes you want to just try something out and it's cool. However, I do think that as a coach for a team, it's really important that we have the reasoning why we want to do this. Because in the end, I think that will help set our athletes up for success. Um, so the way I do it, or the way I would tell you to do it, is to check first, what is the reason why you want to do this? Is there a solution? Is it a solution to a problem? Or is it like a way to confuse your opponent? Or is it to score more effectively? Like there's different reasons why you could do this. And I want you to ask those questions. Like, why is this strategy something you want to use? Is it just something that looks really cool? Or is it something that is actually going to benefit your team in gameplay? So I would like you to ask you those questions before you start, right? So before you even think about like implementing the strategy in training. And then the second part in that is to think about when do you want to do this. So I know this sounds super, um, probably super logical, but it's really important, I think, that when we're working with our skaters and our athletes, that we can be really explicit to them about why we're doing something, when we're doing something, and how. And then that's really important. So asking yourself this question of when you actually want to use this in a game scenario is super important. So at what part of the game, is it the jam start, etc. And then you should make choices. I'm going to repeat that because it's super important. You should make choices. Okay, you're not going to be able to do every single strategy. You're not going to be able to use everything awesome that you come across. So make choices and make those choices based on those questions. Like, why are we doing this? Is this fitting for your team? So yeah, make choices. And then and this is something we talked about on Thursday as well. But I'm going to go over this a little bit longer because not everybody obviously saw the class on Thursday. So, what skills do your team need in order to do this? So, being able to analyze the strategy and look at what the individual abilities need to be. So, if do they need to be able to plow really good? Do they need to skate backwards? Do they need, all these things that an individual would need to do in order to perform this strategy well? And then also check the team abilities, right? So what is the teamwork like? If there's a certain strategy that they need to be able to travel together. Can they do that? Are they really good at moving together as a unit, or is it something you would need to work on? So analyzing what is needed is extremely important so that you also know how realistic is it to implement this strategy, and also how realistic is it, or not realistic, but how long will it probably take you to get your team there if they don't have all the needed skills in order to do the strategy. So I put on some focus points for analyzing the strategy for when you build this training, and this is more on the side of your skaters. So where are your skaters? Now that you've analyzed the strategy and what is needed, and you know kind of roughly what is needed for the strategy in order to do that. Then also analyze your team. So if you look at the individual abilities, basics, do they have the skills they need in order to do this? Do they have the game awareness and understanding to do this strategy? Because sometimes I feel like, if you want to do like a four corner start like Victoria does, is that something that people already understand? Do they have the understanding of like what this entails? Do they understand, like, especially with lower or beginner intermediate teams, do they understand tech definition on this? Um, so when you're changing positions, do they understand where to make pack, etc. So that kind of awareness and understanding is really important to analyze with your skaters. And obviously the technical abilities of their skating, and then also looking at player strengths, right? Especially if we're talking about skaters from different levels, it's really important to realize that you have certain players that will be better at stuff than others, and that's all right, because I think that's always the case. But when you have really different levels in your team, that will be even more the case than when you're coaching a team that has like super high level and is really kind of similar in their skills. And then again, also analyzing your team abilities. So again, looking at where your team is on game awareness and understanding, on technical abilities, so working together, etc. But also a really important one is communication. So is that something that they're already doing? Is it something you need to train more? Is that going to go pretty automatically, etc. And then again, working towards the strengths and understanding the weaknesses. So making sure that when we have a strategy in which we want a certain thing to be done, like let's say it's an offense move, but it's like a team offense move on when the jammer's in the box. So if there's, for instance, one person that needs to like hook one of the forward facing blockers, like being able to make that actual move and to do the technical aspects of that, one might be better in that than the other, right? So let's make sure that we understand where our stronger players are and when they're not, and understand where our weaknesses are in the team so we can work towards, what our strengths, etc. All right. So from analyzing that, you then actually move on to the skills part. So building up the individual skills, obviously, and making sure everybody can do what they need to be able to do in order to actually do the strategy. So making sure that you really think about breaking down those skills. If you have the ability, I don't know obviously how everybody's training plan is, but if you have several days a week and you have a special skill session, like making sure that you build it into the training plan, that the skills you're working on at the skill session is also what you're building onto the strategy stuff you're doing later in the week with the team, for instance, that might be really useful. Also, we talked about this a little bit on Thursday as well, is that when we are training a certain strategy, to make sure that we're really waking up and training our skills before. So, for instance, in one session, if you're planning on doing a certain strategy and you know that plow stops and laterals and quick starts are part of that, then just making sure you incorporate that in like a warm up part of the session is super useful. Um, so apart from individual skills, obviously we also need the team skills. So you need to be able to identify what those are and then how to build them up. Again, this is something you can really train separately from or as a build up to towards the strategy that you want to work to. And that's also a really important part is linking the skills they're practicing and linking the skills that you're training them to the end goal. So being like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is our end goal. But in order to do that, you need all these different building blocks. And that's why we're training them throughout the week or throughout the month or, however long you're taking in order to train that. So really making sure that the athletes have a really good understanding of what you're expecting them to do and why. Um, and that way, I feel like we're really setting our athletes up for success, like making sure that they are aware of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And we're also setting them up for success because we're not asking something from them that they don't have the skills to do. So I think that when we start training the actual strategy, it's really, really important to break it down. So you need to be aware that, especially when you're teaching different skaters of different levels, but even if it's not different levels, you need to be aware that skaters all work in different ways, right? The one brain is not the other, and one learning style is not the other. So everybody has a different way of training and learning. And I think it's super important that we are, as coaches, we are aware of that. And you don't have to know, everybody exactly like which training style works for who, but it means that it's really important that we break it down in different ways. Okay, so there's not just one way of learning because there never is. So I would personally say that when we're breaking down a strategy, it's really useful to get the team involved before training even. Okay, so having an example of what it is that you want them to do in form of video, for instance. So if you find that footage of wherever you saw that strategy, and you're like, "Ooh, that's awesome! I want us to do that," and you've analyzed it and all that, and you're like, "Yes, this is it." Then share that clip with them. Share that little clip of what you expect from them, and share it with them, and also preferably already share why you think this is super necessary and needed for your team. So before they come into training, they already have an idea of, why they're going to do that and what and when and how. So having that example there is super important. And then in training, I would say whiteboards are your friend because they are. I feel like when we can really show stuff on a whiteboard, it's really super clear like where they need to be, when, what, and also just the having the setting of talking around a whiteboard and just showing stuff. It sometimes makes it easier for people to talk about it because sometimes I feel like when we're in a big group, it might be harder for some people to be like, oh, how does this work? And when you're just like kind of around a whiteboard, you can make it a little bit less, I don't know, maybe scary than having to be already on track and blah, blah, blah. So I would like to say that when you're doing something like this, breaking down a strategy, be super clear on each point and be like, do you guys have any questions about this? Because especially stuff like, like pack definition is something that a lot of times I feel like there's still skaters that don't really know what, when, or how. And if we just assume that they know, then they're not gonna actually get it. Okay. So if we're, for instance, doing something where we're stretching out the pack, I would say like, okay, I would put those little, skaters, or I write them or whatever, and I'd put them away and then show like, so this is stretching out the pack. And then when you have somebody who's actually out of play, just be like, so where's this skater? And then check and see if people understand what's going on. So really breaking it down, making it super easy where they don't have to think about their skating yet, and it's just thinking about the strategy and understanding what it is that we're asking from them. Also, one more way to do that, obviously, is to do it on sock derby and just like set it up without them having to think about their skating. Um, oh, Lethal, that's super smart. Yeah. We have like a car and a whiteboard in the back. I know at Berlin they have like a huge standing up whiteboard that can stay in the hall, and it's so handy. It's so useful. And just even taking pictures of the whiteboard and posting it within your team group so people who aren't there can see it later, super useful. Yeah. So yeah, so the other thing, yeah, like I said, this definitely worked. Make sure that people can understand the strategy before they have to need the skills to do it, right? Or they have to actually implement it with their body. So it might be really useful to think about those different ways of doing that. So then the building up in practice. I think this is the funnest part and also the most frustrating part. Um, First of all, I would like to start by saying take your time, okay? Make sure that if you analyzed your team and if you've analyzed the strategy and you know they're going to take some time in order to actually do this properly because they need to build up their skills or because they need to build up the team skills or because they just haven't done this before, make sure to give them enough time so we're setting them up to succeed, okay, and we're not rushing them into something that they can't actually do, because it is frustrating when you're trying to do something and you're like, I can't do this, and actually we're asking something from them that they can't do. So making sure that we are setting them up for success means that we need to be able to really take their time to train it, okay, so don't be like, oh, next week we have a game. Let's try this new thing. Like, I think that's personally every skater's like worst nightmare, because you're not gonna you're not gonna do it, right? It's not gonna be successful. So building our strategy up in practice takes time, and we need to make sure that we plan accordingly. So plan enough time, but also building up strategy in practice and drills. So if we're, for instance, doing um, a certain strategy. Of course, I can't like think of anything from the top of my head. It's early, y'all. But let's say that we're doing a jam start strategy in which we have an offensive player right from the start, and they're starting in the other walls, um, like in their line right away. So we need to make sure that our tripod that is still there on the jam start can really catch that jammer right from the start, right? So that's something we can build up in practice. It's something we can build up with a jammer going 70%, a jammer first only hitting the wall and then traveling. So it's something that we can really build up, and it will make it easier for our skaters to actually become successful, right? So instead of asking them immediately to do the thing, is to make sure we build it up until they can do the thing. Okay. Um, so that's building it up and making sure that we really nail those practice, like nail those drills before that we ask them to do this in any kind of game scenario. So I personally would build stuff up all the way until the most realistic game setting, and then I would actually implement it in stuff like scrimmage. So yeah, so just making sure you build it up and then trying it out in scrimmage. One of the things that tools that I really like to use for tactics and strategy and all that, and even awareness, is to use freeze. I'm freezing because it's funny. But freezing actually really works. Okay, so you've probably all done this, right? It's where you call them, you'll blow the whistle or call freeze in the middle of a jam or drill or whatever, and they all need to stop so you can talk about where they are. Well, if you've never done that, you should. It's super useful. But don't forget to train this. So what you'll see is the first couple of times you'll do this, people will keep skating, people will still do whatever they're doing, and you want them to freeze right at that moment. So making sure that they actually train how to freeze, and to do that a couple of times so it's in their head will make sure that they will actually do it better, and the next time you'll do it, they'll be able to stop more like right when you tell them to. So the way I use this all the time is to tell them to pause or freeze and then analyze what's going on. So I literally go out there and ask them, okay, you're in this spot. Why are you here? Like, what are you doing right now? And it's not to be like an asshole, like, what are you doing? But like to be like creating that understanding and making sure to tell your skaters ahead of time that you're going to be using freeze and that it's to analyze what we're doing really helps them feel less, like I'm on the spot and I need to all of a sudden think about whatever. Like they're already aware of that that's something you're going to ask from them. Um, Also, I feel like in the freeze drill, it's really, really useful to ask people who are in the right spot and people who are not in the right spot. So if you only ask people that are in the wrong spot, it kind of becomes this you're not doing it right session. And it's also good to show people that they are doing the right thing and they're getting it right. It's that reaffirmation. English is not my first language, um, but like it's this reaffirming of what they know is right. So if that makes sense. So yeah, freeze it. It is amazing. Freeze it drill. Yes, lethal. I agree. It is. And it's something that I feel like when we're training strategies, it's so incredibly useful. So ownership of the strategy. So I feel like it's super important that when we are teaching a strategy as coaches, that the skaters really take the ownership of it. So a lot of times strategies will also come from skaters, right? Because skaters are super smart and they know the game and they understand the game. But when you are bringing a strategy forward from a coach's perspective, or even if it's only from a few skaters, I think it's really important that the skaters themselves really take ownership of what they're doing and also, maybe develop it further. Like they have so much knowledge. To quote Nadia Smarty on Thursday, like athletes are smart. They're super smart. And so let's make sure that we give them the ownership that they also deserve. Um, and not like be like, it needs to be exactly like this because I told you. No, if they find new solutions to things or they find new adjustments that work for them, then yeah, make sure to take them seriously in this and like give them the ownership in that what they deserve. Yeah. So I put leadership on track. I think having leadership on track is important on any level. But when we're talking about mixed level teams, it's especially important. I feel like sometimes when we have skaters who are from a significantly different level of skills, but especially of understanding the game, then it's really useful to have somebody there who they know that they can listen to, who they know that they can follow. And in I think in most situations you'll have like this natural leader type thing, but that might not also always work, right? You know your team best, and some teams are have more of that leadership on track than others, and sometimes it's also not the most like it's not the standard person who might actually understand the strategy best, right? So you might really want to analyze during your drills and scrimmage, like, hey, who are those natural leaders or who are the leaders that can actually understand this scrimmage best and use that on track. Okay, so Lethal said they tend to be some of the better communicators on track in our league. Yeah, so a lot of times it is. However, sometimes I also see that it's not per se the best communicators, but like this, they might be the best skaters. They might be whatever. But communication on itself, I could run a whole session about communication on itself. But like, right, we have those people that are communicators that can go like, you need to do this, screaming more than anything. And sometimes it's actually a little bit people that might look quieter, but actually are really good at effectively communicating um, the drills or whatever. So yeah, it's something you really need to watch and see who the best person is to help you with that, or help the team with that, I guess, on track. One of the things I really like using while I'm coaching is trigger words. So with that, I mean like making sure that there are certain words, and it can be the word of what you call a certain strategy or whatever. It can also just be words like engage because you want them to engage their muscles or whatever. Using those kind of trigger words that you use during drills and scrimmage and then you can use during the game, right? So it's really making sure that their mind and their brain is wired to react and listen to those words. So really thinking about what you use in training um, to help for to help better those athletes in what they're doing is super important, and making sure that we use the same words is going to be super helpful for making sure your athletes succeed. And especially when it's athletes that are new to whatever we're teaching or are maybe not as confident, these things can really help. And you need to be aware that you can't tell them words that they don't know because it's not going to help, right? So making sure you use the same language and same words is, I think, super helpful. And again, playing to our strengths and weaknesses, so dealing with the different skills levels is really something that you can figure out when we're doing drills and scrimmage, right? So when you're doing something in which you need somebody to be, I don't know, like that front support person, and you actually have a team in which that front support person who's there is actually not a very good backward skater, then maybe they shouldn't be there, right? So really understanding where are our strengths and where are our weaknesses and how do we incorporate that in our new strategy or drill that we're trying is super important. By the way, if anybody has any questions about this, let me know. Um, Yeah, so play it in a game. Um, I think preparing the team in order to do the strategy that you've been practicing um, is it's super important to really be able to talk to your team about this. So if you have any kind of pre-game meeting, reminding them of what we're doing, going through all the different plays or strategies that you use is super, super, super important. So having it on paper and really walking through like, okay, this is this strategy, this is how we use these or these things. Like if you're talking about certain jam starts, like we're going to do this jam start when they do this, or we want to own the line, so we're going to always do this. Like there's different ways, obviously, of making sure that they are super aware of what those strategies are. And it kind of brings it back to, hold on, sorry. Yeah, it kind of brings it back to these questions, right? Like why are we doing this? Why is this a solution to a certain problem? And it's making sure that they really are aware of the when, the hows, and the whats. And obviously, before a game, this should only be repetition. This shouldn't be something that is new. This shouldn't be something they've never heard before. Obviously, this should be something um, that is just repetition, right? And making sure that we do this repetition throughout throughout the whole process. So not just in the beginning or not just in the middle of training, but also before a game. One of the things I really think is important to make sure that you have it visual. So I say like having it on paper. Obviously, it can be digital. I don't really care, but making sure you have all those notes and stuff that you made on your whiteboard or whatever. Have them digital. Have them visual. Make sure that people know what it is, how it works. I have somebody in our team in Amsterdam that actually works with a 3D printer thing at work, and she made like little miniature puppet things, I guess, like kind of like chess pieces, and like works on like building them around. So it's really visual for her how to work stuff. Like you can even make videos off of that, right? I mean, whatever works for your skaters to have it visual. Okay. Hooks asks, how many weeks or sessions before a game would you start repetition training? So I mean personally I would love it if they already know the strategy and are really aware of it like at least a month before, like depending on what kind of game, because you want to perfect your skill. Because if we go back to when to the training part, like if we're training a certain skill, and this kind of comes into the class I was teaching on Thursday, which is really about like how to build up skills all the way to competition. And again, there's 7 steps. There's 7 steps to everything. But like once you're in step 6, which is like when you're practicing everything, the way it should be, at the speed that it should be, the fatigue that it should be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then 7 is the game. like between that step 6 and 7, you don't want to have just a week. You want people to be ready, um, to actually feel confident in playing. So I guess your assessment in this should be like, when do they have it and when do they feel confident, and how much time do they need in order to do that? And I feel like that differs so much depending on your athletes. Um, but I mean, for me personally, I think from the moment when it until the moment I want them to actually perform it with confidence and awareness and everything that comes with it, I would personally have at least a month. But I think it's really important that they feel super confident to do it. I know there's other teams, or I know there's teams that are, so quick and they understand stuff so quickly that you don't have to actually train it maybe for months on end in order to do it. But I think this really comes down to analyzing your team very well and knowing where they are at. So when you go from drills where you feel like they're comfortable in the strategy and then going to scrimmage, that's definitely also where you'll see it. Like, does it fall apart in scrimmage after they actually really showed that they can do it well in drills? Then you have a longer time to go. If that answers your question. So just to go back to the gameplay. So definitely making sure you have enough time to build that up, and really go through all of it again with your team before the game. And I don't mean before the game like 15 minutes before the game, although that's the moment where we recap as well, right? Okay, let's do this and this. But I would personally say, like, take a session, even if it's after your last team training before the game. Like, just take a moment off skates to talk through some things again, to make sure you're repeating what are we doing, why are we doing this, just to keep them in that cycle. All right. Um, so yeah, analyzing and assessing. I feel like a lot of times we kind of skip this part, and we kind of go from playing a game, maybe analyzing by ourselves a little bit, and then going to practice, right? And we don't really always do this in a like cycle as much. I think this is actually extremely important. So to start, if you can, and seeing how we all have phones with cameras, video your games. Okay. Obviously, we can't all have super fancy video equipment or whatever and always have really good footage, but making sure that we video our game in the best way possible, is to really make sure that we can analyze what we're doing. Okay. And if we're looking at strategy training, so we discussed which strategy we were going to do, when we were going to do it, and how we were going to do it, which means that we can really look at our footage and be like, okay, if this was a certain jam start we wanted to do, look at the footage, look at those jam starts. Were they working? Were we doing it in the right place, the right time, the right moment, whatever was it decided? You can really watch a lot about communication as well. If you're doing a certain strategy that's mid jam, that's like in a scoring pass situation, was it communicated? How did it work? And really analyze what is happening in this. So I know there's quite a lot of different things out there on footage analysis, which is a lot of times also to prep for a game and stuff like this. I really see this more as like analyzing the strategies that we've practiced. So from a coaching perspective, to really watch, what have we practiced? Am I seeing it in the game? And what worked and what didn't. And especially coming from a coaching perspective, I think it's really important to look for yourself as well, like which athletes were struggling and why. Um, right? Can you see if it's a certain skill? Like, is it something they need a form correction on, or is it something they're not getting? And so you can also end up having individual talks with these people where you can show them the footage and be like, so I see this and this. How did you feel? How did you feel doing this? Did you struggle? Etc. So you can actually go on and have that conversation. Apart from the one-on-one, I think it's really important to also take this and to discuss it with the whole team and to make sure that you're really talking through all of these moments, right? Like, okay, so this happened there. Um, what is really useful a lot of times, I feel, for skaters is if you actually set the exact video part, like not just tell them like watch the whole game and let me know. No, let them like prep it for them, okay? And like, okay, so at this jam, at this moment, we had this part and we did this and this is what I think went right, and this is what I think went wrong. Or even just being like, this is a jam where it went really right, and this is a jam where it didn't go as right, so people really know what to look for because footage analysis, just like skating, it's a skill, and not everybody is very good at it, or not everybody finds it very easy to do. So another thing that you could do is when you're analyzing footage like this, and you want to look at some different things. So let's say that you've been training really hard on jam starts, but you've also been training really hard on like certain offense strategies, like giving the team certain things to look at, and like analyzing your own footage. So, for instance, telling a couple of people, like, okay, you're going to watch this and you're going to watch this to prep before a meeting really works because people then get to like analyze it together and they have buddies to discuss it with. And I feel like that can be super useful. I just want to link back for a second um, to the drills and scrimmage part because I didn't say this in here, and I think it's kind of important. If we're talking about video and we're talking about analyzing, please video your trainings. If you have somebody off skates, if you have somebody who's, injured or whatever, and you want them to still be a part of the training, and for your skaters that are on track, it is so useful to video. Okay, showing them during a drill what they're doing, and Lethal saying we started to do this more often recently. Good. Keep it up. Like it's so helpful. I talked about this a little bit in my session on Thursday as well, like making sure that people can visually see what you are seeing. And so you can give them those form corrections where they need it. That's on individual basic skills, but it's just as much on teamwork and strategy skills, right? So just making sure that they are aware of what they're doing and where you want them to do certain things and where not is yeah, it's just extremely helpful. So definitely using video in that part as well. Um, well advised. So yeah, so discussing it with the team, already went over that. So making sure that we are really aware of like, did the strategies work? Did they not? Where are we at? And then obviously this really corny thing of plan, do, review, and assess. So yeah, making sure that when we have assessed and when we have thought of what worked and what didn't work, adjust, continue. Okay, like, and again, like I said in one of the first cycles, make choices because you're going to come back right to the beginning of this cycle, and it's making the right choices for your team. So if you've done a strategy that you spend months on and you're struggling with it in a game scenario, like analyze why and make sure that you are doing the strategies that work for your team and that fit your team. And yeah, I think that's just extremely important to also be able to make choices and be like, no, this is not for us, or this is, like I mean, everybody kind of dropped the flat four wall, right? But Bay Area, they still rock it. Maybe not all the time. And they're obviously also trying to adjust and do different things. But you can also still see that that's something that really works for them. So being able to look at different things, look at different strategies, and make the right choices for your team is super important. And I feel like, especially with beginner teams, for instance, I see a lot of times where they're doing tripod formations where their team is not actually fast enough to cover the whole track. Like, maybe you should keep your fourth person then next to your tripod because you're going to create holes. So being aware of what your team can and cannot do, and then being aware of, if you've done it and you've tried it and it's not working or it is working, to then decide how to move on, I think is a super important thing. So Rad is saying that's something I find really tricky. How do I know when a strategy is above, not compatible to the skill level of the group? So it is super hard. I feel like when we're going through those whole to all of those steps and basically starting with this one. So what I'm showing for those who are on mobile devices is the analyze strategy. So making sure that we're really aware of why we want to do this, what it is that's needed, um, making sure that our skaters, that we analyze what it is that our skaters need to be able to do. I think that's such an important part. Like this might be the most important part of the whole cycle, right? Is making sure that we're really aware of where is their skill level and where is it not. And obviously when we're training, so when we're in step 4 and return like if you've made any mistakes, like if you've not assessed it right and there's people who cannot do it, it will show up here. Okay, it will show up here. You will know. So this is one of those things where you can loop back around and you can go, to those skills and be like, okay, well, in order for you to do this, you might actually need, these and these skills. And this is where it comes as a coach, I think it really comes down to like making sure that we really understand who our skaters are and we can coach them individually where needed as well. I don't know if that helps answer your question. And yeah, yeah, Red. Once you've worked on it, there's some feeling of investment for sure, and that's the problem, right? Um, but I still want us to make choices because sometimes just making the investment, if it's not actually working, um, make choices, and sometimes the choice might be that it's not the right thing for your team and that it isn't fitting. So I think you're actually doing more harm to your team by not making those choices and by being like, oh, we're just going to do everything, right? There's so many teams who are, doing lots of different things, and it gets super chaotic because it's like, what strategy were we doing? Were we doing this one or that one? And also, for those who recognize that, like I've been in a team that's really changed a lot over the years. So there's a constant flow of like new people. And sometimes we're like, oh, let's do this strategy that we did like 3 years ago. I think that was actually still useful. But like half of the team was new after this after that happened, right? So they don't know what you're actually talking about, or it gets really chaotic. So making sure that it's super clear, and again, to have that stuff on paper, right? Making sure that your team knows these are the strategies that we're using. We're using them in these moments. That we're doing these jam starts in these situations. We're doing these passes in these situations. People actually know what it is that you're asking from them is super useful. And obviously, when your team gets better and better, you can build that up. And yeah. All right. So it is 10 minutes to 10 at least in the Netherlands, 10 minutes to 9 in other places, or 10 minutes in the middle of the night somewhere else. That was my presentation. We have like 10 minutes to talk through some questions if you have any. If you want to contact me at any other moment, you can always email me, rollerderbyhooligan@gmail.com. And yes, I created an email address when I started Derby. I should have probably picked something more professional, but So yeah, if you guys have any questions, I have time for questions. So you can drop them in the chat box if you have any. And then our helpful people in the background are making sure that we can put on the questions. In the meantime, when you guys think about your questions, I would also like to really thank Rowline. They are the sponsor for this seminar, and I really appreciate that they are not only putting time and money and investment into creating really awesome equipment, but also in supporting us in coaching and becoming better coaches in roller derby. And I think it's really cool and really awesome. So I appreciate their support, and I wanted to do a shout out. So let me see. I see there's somebody typing, so let's hope there's some questions we can run through at the end of this session. Yay, roll line. Okay. So, question from Hooks. How do you come up with new strategy ideas? Just watch footage and copy other teams? how do you include the strengths and weaknesses of your team? That's a really, really good question. So I come up with new strategies and ideas by definitely watching footage or watching games, talking to people, all kinds of ways. I'm not one of those super, super, super smart skaters that can come up with all kinds of awesome things to bend rules and that kind of stuff. I mean, I know those people are out there. I think they're magical unicorns, and I think we should cherish them. Um, but yeah, like some people are super smart and can think of solutions on track, right? And they're super cool with that. Most people obviously just steal from others because we're not original. Um, but yeah, so sometimes you just watch footage and copy other teams. But if you have a certain problem with, like, you can definitely look at the rules, talk to referees, and try to figure out how to work your way around your problems in that sense. Um, and yeah, so how do you include the strengths and weaknesses of your team? Like running through all those different steps, I think you get a really clear view of where the strengths and weaknesses are of your team. But make sure that you are just as fast as your fastest skate or as your slowest skater, right? So if you want to do something super cool because one person in your team can do it, getting the rest of your team to that same level of at least a base level in order to do whatever you're asking from them might be really challenging. So I'm not telling you to always play it down, but definitely be aware of that. You're not going to be able to do anything successfully if the people don't have at least a base level of the skills you need them to do. And also like really thinking about placement. So, if you're trying to do a certain strategy, um, like we were saying, like you want to do, a certain offense strategy, for instance, and you need somebody who's able to like skate super fast and hook and blah, blah, blah. You can have your you can have your stronger skater that has that skill level. You can have them do that as long as the others also exactly know what their role is, if that makes any sense. I think we have a new question. Oh yeah. Okay. So Hooks, I hope that answers the question. If not, just, write it in the chat box and we can talk more. So Lethal, how would you approach getting skaters of a different skill level on the same page with the strategy? We have some who read the game very well and pick up no problems. Other needs more time and explanation. Yeah, so this is kind of like what I was saying in, I think from top of my head, like step 4, right? Where we're breaking the strategy down and we're really training it in drills and scrimmage. Like this is the moment where you need to talk to your people who understand the strategy well, and you need to talk to your people who don't. So the people who understand it well, they are going to need patience and they are going to need understanding of where the other ones are. So buddying up in this is really useful because it gives the people who understand the strategy and are at a higher level, it gives them some kind of purpose and to take others with them, and also awareness that they need to take others with them in a positive way. And it also gives the people who don't understand it as well more time and ability to catch up. So an example of something that I've done before is where we had a moment, and this was just about like something about we were bridging, right? It was like about bridging back and forth. So I had a skater who just did not understand path definition, like couldn't get it into her brain. So we even went through it where we just took the time and I was like standing behind her and coaching her through where she should be on track during a drill. Like sometimes we just need to make sure that we invest more in the people who have, who need more time because we're a team and we're never actually going to get there if we're just going to be like, oh, you're too slow. We're going to leave you there and we're going to move on because people are just not going to catch up. Like you need to be aware that sometimes you need to be like, pause. We're going to now explain this further and slow it down and make sure that people can catch up. And that's why I say talk to your more experienced people because they need to be aware that you're only as fast as your slowest skater. So they need to make sure that they're aware of where they're at. And in the same time, also give them a role in which they feel like they're useful, so, and that can be a buddy type role, that can be in like, giving them a role within the strategy that actually serves their skills, right? And skills and purpose. So, for instance, if you have that one offense player or whatever, um, like give them that spot, right? Give them something that they can really work with and feel like they're achieving what want to achieve. But especially for the understanding of the game, really breaking it down before you go on skates and do it. So that was like what step 3 or 4. I don't have it right in front of me, but it's super important to make sure that they really understand it before we actually go and do it. If that makes sense. Uh, Lethal says, "What's obvious to one isn't always obvious to everyone else. Absolutely makes sense to help people through. Advanced skaters to be patient." Yeah, it's something that I think is very normal that we forget because they're super excited also and they want to do it and they're like, yes, let's do this. We can do this, blah, blah, blah. But then if you only have one or two people that are lacking behind, um, and they're actually essential as well in the strategy, it's going to be so important to make sure that they come with. So yeah, telling them to have patience and also giving them a role and a purpose, I think is really helpful in that situation. So I hope that was helpful. I see Lethal is still typing. Oh, well, you're welcome. I think we're kind of coming to a close. If anybody else has any questions, just contact me or write it in the group. I'm always very happy and willing to talk to you all about this. And yeah, or contact me over email. Like I said, like you can always reach out. So it's actually really nice because it's like 10. So I think we've done well. If there's, oh, I see somebody still typing. You're welcome. And thanks for being here this early. I know that a lot of people are going to be watching this hopefully later on. And so for those who can't ask questions during the seminar, be free to do it whenever, even if you're seeing this months later, contact me whenever. Okay, well, I'm going to go and sign off because I have to play a roller derby game today. So I'm going to go and get ready and play some roller derby. Thank you so much, all, for spending this morning with me. And thank you so much to Rule 56 and all the volunteers that are making this awesome, awesome online seminar happen. It is great. I really think it's awesome. So thank you all, and thank you for being here. And see you next time.